Stay in ICU forever, old man. I didn't dream it. I heard my wife say it, clear as the heart monitor beside my bed at Christ Hospital in Cincinnati at 3:12 a.m. October 28th. The disinfectant burned my nose, the ceiling tiles swam, and a nurse wrote "Do not stimulate" on the whiteboard, while Linda smoothed the sheet over my chest like she was tucking in a child she didn't want waking up. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Her phone buzzed in the dark. I kept my eyes closed. A whisper, a swipe, then Evan's voice on speaker, thin through the plastic case. "As long as he's not discharged, the plan won't update." The word plan snapped me awake like a slap. I'd run Delaney Heat and Air for nearly 4 decades. Every furnace I'd installed, every service call at midnight, those were deposits in the pension that would carry me and my crew into old age. I wasn't a husband in that bed. I was an account number. 2 days earlier, the cardiology resident told me I'd scared us, yes, but my heart would recover. "You'll be home by November 3rd if we keep your vitals steady," he smiled. Linda didn't. On November 2nd, I reached for the water, and my fingers brushed a folded paper half tucked under the cold cafeteria tray. A private nurse invoice, $2,800, cash requested. I flattened it out against the blanket. "Shift coverage to reduce stimulation," it read. Linda's handwriting scrawled a note at the bottom. "Quiet night, no visitors." I wasn't offended by quiet. I was offended by strategy. The morning of the 3rd came with grey rain against the window and the sharp clack of the nurse's shoes. "Vitals are stable, Mr. Delaney. Discharge pending." Linda's smile was the kind people wear at funerals for strangers. When the forms came, she stepped in. "He's too tired," she told the resident, signing as my medical POA, not as wife. The pen scratched like a tiny saw. In the elevator, my reflection looked 20 years older. In the car, the air smelled like Evan's melon vape and the wet wool of Linda's coat. She drove with both hands at 10 and 2 too carefully, like I might bolt. "We need to talk about your pension elections before year-end," she said, as if we were discussing where to store the Christmas ornaments. Not "I'm glad you're alive," and not "you scared me," just elections. The city slid by in cold needles of rain. Home looked smaller than I remembered. Linda guided me in, set me at the kitchen island, and began fussing with the mail. A glossy flyer for granite countertops. A notice about our property tax, due December 20th. Then a plain manila envelope I didn't recognize. She tucked that one under the rest. I asked for my wallet. She blinked like she'd been asked a riddle. "It's somewhere." My name sounded foreign in her mouth. I held the nurse invoice in my lap, smoothing the crease with my thumb. Reading the date again, 11:02, like numbers could explain intent. When she left to check the upstairs, I shuffled to my home office, the one with the scuffed desk that still smelled faintly of flux and machine oil. I pulled open the top drawer. Paper clips, a stapler, last year's Christmas stamps, and a crisp photocopy I hadn't placed there. "Spousal consent," the header read. My name sat on the line in a signature that almost looked like mine, except my M always swoops. And this one drooped. Someone had signed my retirement with a hand that wasn't mine. The next morning the world was too bright. Even the coffee smelled wrong, burnt and bitter, like something scorched inside the pot. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at that photocopy of my forged spousal consent form. The toner smudged under my thumb. My signature has always had a confident swoop at the end, the mark of a man who signs payroll checks every Friday without hesitation. This one sagged like it had arthritis. Linda breezed in wearing her silk robe, phone in one hand, wine glass in the other, 3 p.m., and she was already on her second pour. "It's standard," she said, setting her phone face down. "You were groggy, Mark. The hospital needed quick paperwork." I didn't answer. The oven timer dinged, sharp, hollow, but nobody moved. It felt like a clock, counting down to something I didn't yet understand. The silence between us stretched long enough to feel like a confession. When she finally broke it, her tone was dry. "We'll just re-sign at the bank later." Don't make this dramatic. I wanted to believe her. 20 years of marriage builds a kind of muscle memory, trust by repetition. But that night, when I opened the bank app on my phone, I saw a new transaction. A 49,500 home equity line of credit draw, initials MD. The D was straight. Mine always curls like a hook. That single letter made my stomach drop. I printed the slip at the office printer and held it under the light. Kitchen remodel, the memo line read. We hadn't remodeled a thing since 2018. I looked at the date, November 5th, and thought about that hospital bed, about the nurse's quiet handwriting on the whiteboard, "Do not stimulate." It was dawning on me. They weren't trying to calm my heart. They were trying to pause my life long enough to take it. I pressed play on my voicemail. Evan's voice, casual, confident, too familiar with things that weren't his business. Mum says, keep Dad calm. HR won't switch survivorship if he can't log in. The message played again when I didn't hit stop. Survivorship. That wasn't a word a stepson should know. It was a word lawyers used, plan administrators used, people with access they shouldn't have. I'd built Delaney Heat and Air from a single rusted van in 1987. Every receipt, every invoice, every furnace replaced. Those were my pension, my legacy. Every month, I'd add a little to the cash balance plan so my techs could retire right beside me. Every bolt I tightened was a promise. And now, the woman who'd kissed me through hospital plastic was forging my name to steal it. I should have yelled. Maybe 20 years ago I would have. But when you're 61, anger hits the heart like a hammer. I just sat there, listening to the refrigerator hum and the faint click of Linda's heels. Upstairs, I slid the forged document into a freezer bag, one of those heavy-duty ones we use for compressor parts, and wrote in black Sharpie, Kitchen 1105. I wasn't sure why. Maybe because labeling things gave me control. The dog scratched at the back door, whining. Old buddy, 14 years, bad hip, loyal to a fault. I opened the door and stepped out into the November drizzle. Cincinnati streetlights bled through the fog, halos around sodium bulbs. I stood there barefoot on the cold deck wood, clutching that plastic bag like a lifeline. The air tasted like metal. That was the moment the grief hit. Not for the marriage, but for the man I used to be. The one who believed loyalty was its own insurance policy. I realized I was mourning trust itself. I thought about calling Linda downstairs, confronting her, demanding truth. But the truth I already had, on paper. What I needed now was proof. And time. I looked up at the sky, a dull sheet of grey, and whispered something I hadn't said out loud since my father died. God, just keep me calm enough to think. I went back inside, the floor cold under my feet, and wrote one word on the kitchen whiteboard where "Do not stimulate" had once been written. Remember. Then I picked up the phone and called my sister, Nora, a retired nurse who'd never been fooled by anyone's charm. Not even Linda's. She answered on the second ring. "You sound winded, Mark. What's going on?" "I think Linda forged my pension papers," I said quietly. "And maybe more." There was a pause. I could hear her steadying her breath, the way nurses do before emergencies. "Then we start labeling everything," she said. "Every lie gets a date, a file, and a plan." And for the first time since that hospital bed, I felt my pulse steady. Because now this wasn't grief. It was preparation. Next morning we'd start the first file. November 6th, Operation Quiet Truth. Nora showed up at my house just after sunrise on November 6th, bundled in a grey coat and carrying 2 cups of diner coffee. The smell hit before her words did. Strong, bitter, grounding. She looked around my kitchen, eyes sharp as ever. "You look pale," she said. "Let's fix that. But first, let's fix this mess." We sat at the table with a stack of papers between us, the forged consent, the HELOC printout, the nurse invoice. She pulled out a little notebook from her purse, the kind nurses used for vitals. "If Linda's saying ICU forever," she murmured, uncapping her pen, "we document forever." That's how it started, Operation Quiet Truth. At 9 a.m., we stopped by the CVS near Glenway Avenue. Nora bought a cheap digital recorder and a spiral ledger with blue lines and a cover that read, "Notes and Numbers." I slipped the receipt inside the front page. From now on, even the smallest detail would live in that book. Dates, calls, signatures, dollar amounts. No hunches, only evidence. Next call was to Carla, the forensic accountant I'd helped years ago when her brother's union job was at risk. She owed me one, and she never forgot a favor. I didn't need sympathy. I needed numbers. She agreed to meet that evening at her home office. "Bring statements," she said. "All of them. And your temper. Leave that behind." By noon, I sat in my truck in the parking lot of Delaney Heat and Air, the heater blasting. Opened the company laptop and checked recent transactions. Linda had authorized consulting payments, 12 of them, totaling $18,320 to someone named C. Garner. A quick look at the memo lines made me laugh without humor. Business advisory, market research, equipment audit. We hadn't done any of those. Garner was her cousin. That evening, Carla spread my files across her desk, reading with someone staging a liquidity shuffle before a marital split. "Clean the books, cry in court." She looked up, eyes narrowing. "You want my opinion?" I nodded. "To get a lawyer, not a family one, an ERISA guy." By 8:12 p.m., I was on the phone with Atty Holden, a specialist in retirement law. His voice was calm, seasoned, like he'd seen every flavor of betrayal money could buy. I told him about the forged consent, the HELOC, the hospital whisper. He paused just long enough to make me uneasy. "Mr. Delaney, I'll ask a question that might sound strange. Is there any chance your wife was ever legally married before you and never finalized the divorce?" I almost laughed. "That's not possible," I said. But then an image surfaced. A sun-bleached Nevada postcard that had sat for years in Linda's old cookbook. A chapel under a blue desert sky captioned, "Once is enough, unless it isn't." Holden's tone didn't change. "I'll email you a records request form for Clark County. Get it certified. If she's still legally attached to someone else, that's not gossip, and that's case law. And it could void her survivorship rights altogether." When I hung up, the air in the room shifted. I wasn't just betrayed. I was onto something provable. Nora helped me fill out the request form and sealed it in an envelope before I could overthink it. "Certified mail," she said, pressing the flap down. "Never trust regular postage for liars." At 11:15 p.m., I sat at my desk under the yellow glow of the old banker's lamp, photographing the forged spousal consent with my phone. The difference in pen pressure, the unnatural slant, all of it was there, captured in pixels. I printed a copy for Holden and slipped the original into a fireproof pouch next to the nurse invoice. By midnight, the house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and Buddy's soft breathing at my feet. I could smell Linda's perfume lingering in the hallway, floral, expensive, suddenly nauseating. I checked the pension portal one last time. Still active, still showing spouse Linda Delaney. I stared at the words until they blurred. Tomorrow that would change. Not out of rage, but out of reason. Because revenge, I was learning, isn't about striking fast. It's about documenting slow. At 8:31 a.m. the next morning, Holden called. His voice was steady, almost cheerful. "Meet me at the courthouse, Mark," he said. "We're filing a temporary restraining order. It's time to make your recovery official, on paper." Filing that TRO on November 8th felt like shedding a hospital gown and stepping into armor. The courthouse was gray and cold, the kind of place where words like permanent and irrevocable are born. I stood next to Holden at the clerk's counter as she stamped the papers, that heavy, blue ink seal thudding down like the sound of justice taking its first breath. "This stops her from accessing the company plan or making withdrawals until the dispute is settled," Holden explained. His tone was flat, almost surgical. "We'll start with a freeze. Then we dig." When I stepped back outside, the sky over downtown Cincinnati looked like wet steel. I pulled out my phone and called Pete, my foreman. "Change the office alarm code," I said. "Now, and log Evan's admin account out of everything." Pete didn't ask questions. 20 years of loyalty made explanation unnecessary. "Done," he said. "You okay, boss?" "Not yet," I said, "but I will be." By 2:14 p.m., every lockout was complete. No scenes, no shouting, just governance. I wasn't playing husband anymore. I was acting trustee. That night, Carla came by with updates. Her audit traced the 49,500 HELOC draw to a kitchen remodel contractor called Midline Interiors, a business that hadn't filed taxes since 2019. The bank slip showed Linda's initials beside mine. They didn't even try to hide it well, Carla said, tapping the papers. And that's arrogance, not intelligence. I sat there, nodding, my heart steady but my hands cold. I'd never realized betrayal could have a paper trail this crisp. On November 10th, I sent an official request to HR at Delaney Heaton. Please provide copies of all spousal consents. Received between October 15 and November 5, 2025. Their auto-reply came seconds later. We acknowledge. Receipt of your planned trustee request. Simple words, but to me they felt like barbed wire tightening around the truth. That evening, I found myself wandering upstairs to our bedroom. Hers still smelled faintly of rosewater and wine. On the nightstand sat a jewelry dish, small and white with a gold rim. I hadn't noticed before, but there was a faint tan line where a second ring must have sat, thinner than her wedding band. I traced it with my thumb, then left the dish exactly as I found it. I didn't need confrontation. I needed evidence. 2 days later, November 12th, I was having lunch alone at Price Hill Diner, one of those old Cincinnati staples where the coffee tastes like burnt courage. I'd just finished a BLT when the waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a kind face, leaned over and whispered, "You're Mark Delaney, right?" "Yeah," I said cautiously. "She comes in here on Thursdays," she said quietly, glancing toward the door. "Blonde hair, same last name on the card, always with a younger guy. Orders decaf, laughs too loud." She handed me a napkin before walking off. On it, in pen, she'd written, "Last seen 11/7, booth 5. The napkin smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee. But to me, it smelled like confirmation. That night, I recorded a calm 2-minute voice message for Linda. "We're separating finances," I said evenly. "Pending a full review of the accounts." My tone wasn't angry. It was administrative, the way you tell someone a system update is required. I didn't mention the TRO. I didn't mention Nevada. I didn't mention the waitress. I wanted her comfortable, predictable, overconfident. Revenge, I was learning, isn't about reaction. It's about rhythm. When I ended the call, I saved the audio file to a USB drive and labeled it with blue tape. 11:12 message, separation notice. It joined the growing stack in my fireproof pouch. Forged consent, nurse invoice, HELOC slip, ledger pages. Each one a heartbeat toward justice. 2 days later, on November 14th, the email arrived. Subject, report. Requested background, L. Delaney. I clicked. 3 photos appeared first. A 2003 Vegas chapel. A county docket that stopped at separation petition, and a current picture of a man named Joseph Garner, bus driver, Henderson, Nevada. Beneath it, one line from the PI, "Her first husband never divorced her." I leaned back in my chair, feeling something break loose inside me. Not grief this time, but clarity. Linda wasn't my wife. She was someone else's unfinished business. And now, legally, that changed everything. The 3 photos sat on my desk like small explosions. The first, Linda in a white dress, 2003, smiling in front of a plastic Elvis statue at a Las Vegas strip chapel. The second, a Clark County court docket showing separation petition filed, but no final decree. The third, taken only months ago. The same man from that wedding photo, now grayer, heavier, wearing a bus driver's uniform with Henderson Transit Authority stitched above the pocket. And there, plain as day, the caption typed by the investigator, "Joseph Garner." No record of divorce on file. My first thought wasn't rage. It was relief. The universe had finally handed me something measurable, provable, and legal. No more gaslighting. No more "you were groggy." This was paper. Paper doesn't lie. Nora came by that afternoon, found me sitting at the desk with the photos fanned out like a deck of truth. "Tell me that's not," she started. "It is," I said, sliding the chapel photo toward her. "Clark County says she's still married to him." "You can't marry 2 men at once, right?" Nora's nurse instincts kicked in, calm, practical. "Then she's not your wife, Mark. And if she's not your wife, she's not entitled to a dime of your pension." Exactly. By November 16th, the certified confirmation arrived by mail. No decree of dissolution on record. I signed for it right there at the door. The mailman gave me a look like he could feel something shifting in the air. Long story, I said. He nodded, sympathetic. I called Holden and read the letter out loud. He whistled softly. If that's true, ERISA rules are clear. Survivorship rights don't apply to someone who isn't legally your spouse. We can move to freeze her beneficiary status. He paused. You understand what this means, Mark? Once we file, it's over. She loses everything connected to your pension. I understand, I said. And I want it in motion before she smells smoke. But Linda already smelled smoke. On November 20th, she surprised me with a holiday dinner. It was far too early for Thanksgiving, but she insisted on cooking anyway. The dining room table was set for two. Candles, cranberry sauce, the whole Norman Rockwell lie. The air reeked of cinnamon and deceit. She poured wine before I even sat down. I just think, she said, stirring gravy, that we should finalize your pension paperwork before the holidays. You don't want delays, right? Her tone was too light, practiced. I could hear the tremor under it. I watched her tap her fork against her glass, a sound so sharp it made my chest ache. I looked at her hands, both rings gone now. No wedding band, no second ring, just faint tan lines. Funny, I said. You used to wear 2 rings. What happened to the other one? She froze, then smiled too quickly. I had it cleaned. The oven timer dinged. She jumped. We ate in silence. Every movement felt like choreography. She kept glancing toward her purse, where her phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times. Evan, no doubt. Linda, I said finally, setting my fork down. Why do you keep pushing this pension talk? She shrugged. Because it's important, Mark. You could die any day, you know. We need to make sure I'm protected. I smiled thinly. We'll make sure of that, I said. In court. December 2nd. Her fork slipped, hitting the china with a metallic clang. What? She stammered. Judge Keller's docket, Holden's filing. You'll get the paperwork. I leaned back. You wanted protection. Let's make it official. Her eyes flashed, just for a second, with something cold and cornered. Then came the performance, the trembling lip, the soft voice. You're paranoid, Mark. I've been taking care of you. I nodded slowly. Yes, you have. That's what makes this so easy to prove. The rest of dinner passed in silence. She picked at her food. I finished mine calmly. I wanted her uneasy. I wanted her to feel the ground shift the way I had in that hospital bed. When I went upstairs later, I could hear her crying in the kitchen. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. Either way, it wasn't my concern anymore, because for the first time since that October night, the power had shifted. The next morning, Holden called. Judge Keller confirmed our hearing for December 2nd, he said. Bring everything, letters, invoices, the works. I'll be there, I told him, with every receipt. As I hung up, I looked out the window at the first snowflakes of the season dusting the yard. Cold, clean, unbothered by lies. It was almost poetic. Justice arriving in winter. December 2nd, grey sky over Hamilton County. Cincinnati felt half frozen, and so was I. I stood outside the courthouse in my best Navy suit, the one I'd worn to bid jobs, to funerals, and now to war. Nora patted my arm. Breathe. You've got the truth. That's oxygen enough. Inside courtroom 3B, the fluorescents hummed like they always do in government buildings. The HVAC vent above the bench sighed. I'd installed that system 15 years ago. It was the same hum my company made when it worked right. Steady, honest. Linda sat at the respondent's table in a winter white suit, hair curled, expression rehearsed. Evan was behind her, scrolling his phone like this was a boring meeting. The moment I saw them, my pulse stayed level. I'd already bled out my rage weeks ago. Now there was only arithmetic. Judge Keller entered, gavel tapping once. "We're here on Delaney versus Delaney. Motion to confirm plan governance and freeze spousal survivorship pending dispute." Holden stood, calm as a surgeon. "Your Honor, the petitioner is not seeking dissolution or damages. He's seeking factual clarity, specifically whether Mrs. Delaney had lawful spousal standing under ERISA at the time of alleged forged documentation." Linda's lawyer, a man with a too-perfect tie knot, rose next. "My client maintains this is a tragic misunderstanding. Mr. Delaney recently suffered a cardiac event and may have confused paperwork signed during recovery." The judge looked over her glasses. "That your best shot?" Holden didn't waste breath. He reached into his briefcase and placed 3 documents on the evidence table: the Clark County certified letter, the diner napkin photo, and the forged spousal consent. No drama, no grand reveal, just quiet legal gravity. He said, "For the record, Clark County confirms no decree of dissolution in Garner versus Garner, filed 2003. Meaning, by operation of law, Linda Garner remains legally married to Joseph Garner and cannot be simultaneously married to the petitioner." You could have heard a pen drop. Linda's lawyer flipped through the papers, jaw tightening. "We'll need time to verify." Holden cut in, still calm. "Verification already attached, certified copy, docket stamped." He paused, sliding. Another page forward, a DMV record showing a co-signature on Joe Garner's condo refinance, dated 2011. 8 years into her so-called marriage to Mr. Delaney. Judge Keller leaned back, tapping the arm of her chair. "So the lady doubled up," she said dryly. "That about right?" Linda let out a brittle laugh, the same one she used when the thermostat blinked error. "Joe and I separated years ago," she said, waving a manicured hand. "This is ancient history." Holden didn't raise his voice. "Ancient history still counts when it's never closed, Mrs. Garner." Evan looked up for the first time, eyes darting between us. "Mom, what are they saying?" he whispered. She hissed, "Quiet." Holden handed the judge one last sheet, my HR email from November 10th, acknowledging the trustee request to review spousal consents. "Timing aligns perfectly, Your Honor." Forged forms submitted while petitioner was hospitalized. Attempted Hellock draw immediately after, pattern consistent with financial coercion. The judge studied the papers, then fixed Linda with the kind of look that melts lies. "Mrs. Garner, did you sign this man's name on a retirement form?" Linda's lipstick trembled. "He told me to." I spoke for the first time. "No, I didn't. Just 4 words. The sound of truth can be small and still fill a room." Judge Keller rapped the gavel once. "Enough." She leaned toward the clerk. "Mark as exhibits A through E." Then she looked back at us. "This court recognizes a substantial question as to legal marriage and potential document forgery. The petitioner is authorized as trustee to implement a fraud hold on the plan's spousal survivorship pending verification." Linda blinked. "You can't just—" "I just did," the judge said, standing. 10-minute recess." As the courtroom emptied, I stayed seated. Nora squeezed my shoulder. Holden gave a quiet nod. Evan muttered something to his mother, but she ignored him, her eyes darting toward me like maybe she could still talk her way out of this. The bailiff opened the side door. Cold air rushed in from the hallway. I stepped through it, feeling 20 pounds lighter. Holden followed. "You ready?" he asked. "For what?" I said. He smiled faintly. "For the click." Out in the corridor, sunlight poured through the glass atrium like an interrogation light. I took Nora's phone. She held it out with the pension portal already open. The judge's minute entry had been uploaded 5 minutes earlier. Temporary fraud hold approved, pending confirmation of marital status. I scrolled to the beneficiaries tab. My thumb hovered for a second. Linda's reflection glared back at me in the phone screen from across the hall, frozen in disbelief. Then I tapped, "Remove spouse." The phone blinked. "Update successful." That was it. No fireworks, just a soft mechanical click echoing through the marble hallway. At 9:41 a.m., 20 years of manipulation ended. In seconds, Holden exhaled. "Congratulations, Mr. Delaney. You just executed the cleanest revenge the law allows." Behind us, Linda's voice rose, brittle and panicked. "You can't do this. That money's mine." I turned. "It was never yours," I said. "You just borrowed my name to get near it." The bailiff stepped between us. Evan grabbed his mother's arm. "Mom, let's go," he whispered. But she was still staring at me like she was seeing a ghost, the man she thought would stay sedated forever. I slipped the phone back into Nora's hand. My heart monitor from weeks ago had beeped faster at rest than it did now. As we walked out under the courthouse dome, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. Older, sure, but standing. Free. Outside, the December sun broke through for the first time all morning. It glinted off the courthouse windows, sharp and clean, like the blade of something righteous. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet. It sounded like a digital click, and a woman realizing her last safety net had vanished. Tomorrow, I thought, I'll change the locks. Not out of spite, but ceremony. The courthouse order arrived by email at 7:42 a.m. Holden's subject line read simply, "Fraud hold activated, confirmed by HR." I opened the PDF, saw the official letterhead, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Effective immediately, it read. "All survivorship benefits under the Delaney Employee Pension Plan are suspended pending confirmation of lawful spousal status. Beneficiary designation Linda Delaney has been removed by trustee authority." One paragraph. $700,000 erased. Not stolen, not hidden, just rightfully reclaimed. I scrolled to the timestamp. 9:41 a.m. December 2nd. That was the moment it happened. The moment I pressed remove spouse. Funny how justice has coordinates. At 8 sharp, the front doorbell rang. Not a friendly knock. That fast, nervous ring that comes from guilt. Linda stood on the porch, coat half-buttoned, hair unbrushed, mascara smudged. Evan hovered behind her, pale and silent. "You froze everything," she said, voice trembling. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said, stepping aside so the dog wouldn't bark. "You forged my name, Linda. You opened a credit line in my signature. And according to Clark County, you were never even my wife." Her lips trembled. "It was years ago. Joe and I are still married," I finished. 8 years into our marriage, you co-signed his refinance. "That's not a footnote, Linda. That's fraud." She tried to speak again, but words collapsed under the weight of truth. Evan looked at the floor, then at me. "He's bluffing," he muttered. I handed him a printout of the court's minute entry. "Here," I said. "Bluff in ink." He didn't take it. He didn't have to. His eyes flicked across the paper anyway, catching the words, "Fraud hold approved." His jaw tightened. "You think this makes you the good guy?" "I don't think anything," I said quietly. "I just follow the evidence. You and your mother should try it sometime." Linda's hand shook as she reached for the banister. "You can't just erase me," I met her eyes. "I didn't erase you. You erased us." I just confirmed the deletion. She left without slamming the door. That's how you know the fight's over, when even rage runs out of breath. At 9 low, Nora arrived with a locksmith. He wore a Carhartt jacket and smelled like metal and tobacco. "Rekeying everything?" he asked. "Front, back office, garage," I said. "Change the codes too," he nodded. "Big change," he muttered, tapping in new combinations. "Fresh start." While he worked, I sorted documents into piles on the dining table, originals for me, duplicates for Holden, and copies for the accountant. Each sheet felt lighter now, not weapons anymore, just records of a war that was ending. By noon, Pete dropped by with coffee and his usual mechanic's bluntness. "Heard the courtroom got spicy," he said, grinning. "You could say that," I said. "You ever watch someone realize the law isn't a suggestion?" Pete chuckled, but his tone softened. "You did good, boss. You fought clean. That's rare these days." I looked at the file folder marked Plan Freeze, December 2nd. Clean's the only way it sticks, I said. Around 1, my phone buzzed. An email from HR confirming the update had propagated through all systems. Fraud hold active. Beneficiary Byung Trust. Review date January 6. That was the digital equivalent of closing a door. At 3, Holden called. The judge wants everything wrapped up quietly, he said. Her lawyer's already hinting at settlement. You hold all the cards now. I don't want to destroy her, I said, though part of me still wanted to. Just balance the books. Then we'll do that, he said. Legally, calmly, permanently. After we hung up, I went to the back door where Buddy waited, tail thumping. The snow outside was bright enough to hurt. I opened the door, let him run, watched him roll in the fresh powder like nothing bad had ever happened. I thought about that hospital room, the beeping monitor, the whisper, keep him sedated, we can't agitate the heart. They had treated me like a liability. But liabilities can become assets when they start documenting. That evening, I walked through the office one last time before closing. Evan's desk was empty, just a half-finished energy drink and a torn post-it that said, audit logs. I smiled faintly. He must have realized too late that every admin access leaves fingerprints. Before leaving, I powered down all the systems and locked the server cage. My reflection in the plexiglass looked steadier than it had in months. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. The air smelled like new beginnings, cold metal, diesel, and freedom. At home, I poured 1 glass of bourbon and sat by the window. The digital clock read 9:41 p.m., exactly 12 hours since the click that ended everything. Some people mark anniversaries with rings or dates carved into trees. Mine would always be that minute, 9:41, the moment I stopped being her patient and became my own protector. Justice didn't roar. It clicked. Tomorrow, I'd rekey the final lock, the one on my heart, and label that chapter exactly the way Nora taught me. Closed, December 3rd. December 10th, 1 week after the click that changed everything, I woke to the sound of the mail slot clattering. The dog barked once, then went back to sleep. I shuffled to the front door, coffee in hand. And there it was, a thick, cream-colored envelope, stamped with the Hamilton County seal. I knew what it was before I even tore it open. Order of Preliminary Injunction. Respondent Linda Garner, a.k.a. Linda Delaney, is hereby enjoined from accessing company systems, financial instruments, or retirement assets under the petitioner's control. The Delaney Employee Pension Plan shall maintain its fraud hold until confirmation of lawful marital status. I stood there, reading those lines over and over. For weeks, I'd been fighting to prove what I already knew. Now the law said it out loud. Justice had an official letterhead. At 10:20 that morning, I followed through on the promise I'd made to myself. I changed the locks on the house. The locksmith, same man from the day before, whistled while he worked. "Lot of folks waiting too long to do this," he said. "You're ahead of the game." "I'm just catching up," I told him. When he finished, I labeled 3 boxes and left them neatly by the door. Winter, keepsakes, papers, open with counsel. Linda's clothes, her framed photos, her favorite porcelain angel from the mantel, all there. No vengeance, no slashing, no screaming. Just closure boxed and barcoded by emotion. I didn't text her. I didn't need to. The message was the empty closet. Later that afternoon, Holden called. "You sitting down?" he asked. "Always am these days," Clark County responded. Official letter. No divorce decree ever recorded. Separation petition unresolved. For a moment, I just listened to the hum of the office HVAC through the phone. Same hum I'd installed years ago, steady, controlled. What does that mean exactly? It means legally she was never your wife, which means every consent she signed, every withdrawal she made, every claim to survivorship, null and void. Permanently? Permanently, he said. There was a long pause, then I heard his pen click. "I'll be filing to have her survivorship formally denied. The judge will probably refer the forged signature to the county prosecutor for review." I smiled. Not wide, just the kind of quiet smile you give when the weight lifts and you realize you've been walking uphill for months. She forged my name, I said. Now the paper's signing back. By the next day, December 11th, Carla delivered her final report, every withdrawal, every falsified check. She traced $200 in cash withdrawals to a joint account Linda accessed the week I was in ICU. Pattern's clean, she said. No gray area. She took, you froze. You win. She handed me a manila folder and added softly, "This is what ethical revenge looks like, Mark. Clean math." On December 12th, the final confirmation arrived. No divorce on record. Separation petition unresolved. Those 8 words stripped 20 years of lies down to paperwork. When Holden called to read the judge's final summary a week later, I wrote every line in my ledger, neat and slow. Spousal status not established. Survivorship denied. Forgery referred to prosecutor. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt precise. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was repair, because the truth is, the law didn't care about my feelings. It cared about the facts, but that was enough. Facts hold. Feelings fade. Linda's lawyer emailed Holden the next morning, asking for a quiet settlement. No press, no noise, just terms. Holden's reply was one sentence, "My client agrees." The terms were simple. Linda kept her car, her jewelry, and her personal accounts. I kept the house, the company, and the pension. The HELOC debt shifted entirely to her. We didn't meet again. No dramatic goodbye. Just signatures and silence. That evening I locked the office for the first time without fear. The thermostat read 68 degrees. Steady, perfect, balanced. I stood there a long while, hand on the door, listening to the quiet hum of the furnace. It wasn't rage keeping the room warm anymore. It was justice. December 18th arrived quiet and grey, the kind of Ohio morning where the sky looks half erased. The storm had passed, both the literal one and the one with a face and a wedding ring that never meant anything. I parked outside the Delaney Heat and Air warehouse and sat there for a minute, watching steam rise from the roof vents. This place had been my real marriage. Inside, the shop smelled like metal and dust. The scent of work, of honest sweat. Rows of copper coils, sealed compressors, filters stacked to the ceiling. Each one was a promise I'd made to someone who trusted me to keep the heat on. I walked the floor, running my hand along the cold aluminum, and realized I didn't need forgiveness. Every furnace I'd ever installed was another brick in my retirement. Every receipt a testimony that I'd built something real while Linda built illusions. Nora stopped by mid-morning with 2 thermoses, coffee for her, chamomile for me. "You look lighter," she said, sitting on an overturned crate. "I feel like I finally exhaled," I said. "Not happy, just steady. That's what healing sounds like," she said. Then after a pause, "You're not planning to humiliate her, right?" I shook my head. "No, the court order was enough. The law did what anger couldn't," she smiled. "Then you did it right. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the ledger open. Not the company one, mine. Every entry from the last 2 months was there, written in Nora's tidy hand. Oct 28, do not stimulate. No 5, HELOC $49,500. Deck 2, fraud hold approved. 9:41 a.m. 2 months of chaos, reduced to calm handwriting and simple numbers. I touched the line that read 9:41 a.m. and smiled. That moment used to replay in my head like a movie. Now it played like a lesson. I poured a cup of tea and stared at the note taped to the refrigerator, the same one I'd written weeks ago. Remember, the oven timer dinged. The same sound that once filled my house with tension now just told me dinner was ready. The dog barked once, demanding his share, tail wagging like he didn't care about court orders or pension freezes. I sat back and thought about everything I hadn't done. I hadn't posted about it. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't destroyed her car or her name. I'd done something rarer. I'd outlasted her quietly. The real revenge wasn't what I took. It was what I kept. My integrity, my company, my calm. Later I got an email from Evan, just one line. "I'm sorry, I read it 3 times. Then I typed 2 words back, "Do better." No anger, no lecture, just instruction. Because the next generation learns by how we end our fights. Before bed, I checked the pension portal one last time. The beneficiary line read simply, Delaney Employee Trust. Clean, honest, not a person, but a principle. I replaced the plan's 2FA from Nora's backup phone to mine, smiled and locked it away in the desk drawer. Then I stood by the window, watching the snow outside. Every flake was another piece of proof that you can rebuild quietly after destruction. No fire required. Nora's words echoed in my head. Your heart is a muscle. Boundaries are too, she was right. The more you use them, the stronger they get. I raised my mug, whispered to the empty room, to boundaries, and drank. Out in the dark, the snow kept falling steady, patient, unbothered. I thought about that hospital note, do not stimulate. And I laughed softly to myself. Waking up had been the most stimulating thing I'd ever done. Christmas was coming. So was the paperwork. Justice was already here. December 22nd, the date stamped at the top of the final order, arrived with soft snow and a silence I'd earned. The case was closed. The pension survivorship removal permanent. The Delaney Employee Trust now sat as the sole beneficiary. I didn't need to read the order twice. I just folded it once, slid it into my ledger, and wrote next to it in blue ink, finalized. Outside, the air smelled of snow and diesel, Cincinnati in winter. Inside, the house was clean again, no perfume, no tension, no secrets in drawers. I made a pot of coffee, poured a cup into my old Best HVAC Tech mug, and smiled at the irony. It wasn't the best coffee, but it was honest. At the shop, the guys gathered in the break room, same table we'd used for safety meetings. Pete had brought a grocery store sheet cake, frosting thick as drywall paste. To the boss, he said, handing me a knife. And to the pension that ain't going anywhere. The room erupted in laughter, the kind that comes from people who've seen you at your worst and still clock in the next day. I cut the cake, uneven as always, and told them the truth. The plan's safe. You'll retire when you're supposed to. I'm just the custodian again, like it should be. Someone whistled. Someone else clapped. I realized then that this, not money, what was my legacy. A dozen people who trusted me with their futures, and I'd almost let someone turn it into a heist. After everyone left, I sat alone in the office with one small errand left. I'd kept the nurse's $2,800 invoice from that ICU week, the one Linda had used to keep me sedated. Her name wasn't on it, just initials, M. Ross, RN. She'd only done her job. I wrote her a check for the same amount and added a note. You followed instructions, not intentions. Thank you. Then I mailed it, because even collateral damage deserves compassion. That evening the house felt warm again, not from the furnace, but from the absence of deceit. The dog lay by the fire, tail twitching in sleep. I opened a bottle of bourbon I'd been saving since my 60th birthday and poured a single glass. The burn was clean, not bitter. At 8:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but the message preview stopped me cold. Linda, I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to feel safe. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. What do you even say to someone who weaponized your trust? I drafted 5 different replies, some angry, some poetic. One just the word, why. Then I deleted them all. Finally, I typed 6 words, we both meant to live. Goodbye. I hit send and turned off the phone. Outside, the snow came down heavier now, muffling the world. I changed the porch light bulb, the same one that had flickered the night I collapsed. It glowed steady this time, solid, reliable. I stood there for a minute, breathing in the cold, watching it glow. Behind me, Buddy let out a soft bark, impatient for me to come in. I laughed, that deep kind of laugh that feels like exhaling months of tightness. Inside, the warmth wrapped around me like forgiveness. I set my ledger on the counter and looked at the last line I'd written. December 22nd. Final order entered. Beneath it, I added one more. December 23rd, begin again, no fireworks. No revenge victory lap, just a man, a house, a company, and a quiet heart finally beating at its own rhythm. Outside, Christmas lights blinked from neighboring houses, their reflections flickering across the snow. Each one looked like a heartbeat, proof that life, even after betrayal, keeps pulsing forward. I poured the last sip of bourbon, raised it toward the window and whispered to the empty night. To peace earned the hard way. The bulb above the door burned steady, the house stayed warm, and for the first time in months, I felt truly home. December 28th, 5 days after the final order, 3 after Christmas. The house was quiet, still smelling faintly of pine and wood polish. I'd spent the morning sorting end-of-year invoices when I heard the mail slot clatter again. A manila envelope slid across the floor. No return address, just my name written in neat, looping cursive. I opened it with a kitchen knife, and out slid a glossy brochure. A cartoon Elvis, grinning in gold ink, pointing to block letters that read, "Renew your vows, any time. Forever Chapel, Las Vegas, Nevada." My hands froze. The same chapel where Linda had married Joe in 2003, the one that never filed a divorce. For a second, I just stared. Then I started to laugh. Not the sharp, angry kind, the slow, disbelieving one that sneaks out when the universe plays its best joke. Some vows need renewing. Some need releasing. I slid the brochure into my ledger under the tab artifacts and wrote beside it, "Received Deck 28. From Forever Chapel." Life has a sense of humor. That laugh turned into something softer. Gratitude, maybe. Because that envelope wasn't a curse. It was a reminder that closure doesn't always knock politely. Sometimes it mails itself with bad graphic design. I poured a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching snow fall like ash across the yard. The world looked clean again. The porch light glowed steady, same one I'd changed a few nights before. Every flicker was gone. I thought back to that hospital room, the steady beeping, Linda's whisper, "Keep him sedated." I thought about how I'd laid there, half alive, believing love still meant safety, and now I was living proof that awakening can be quieter than revenge and twice as lasting. I turned the brochure over, read the slogan again, "Any time." "Not in this lifetime," I said aloud. I grabbed my pen and flipped to the last page of the ledger, the one Nora had labeled "Closure." The lines were empty, waiting. I wrote slow, the way my father used to sign paychecks. Deliberate. Permanent justice wasn't the freeze at 9:41 a.m. Justice was every step that made that click lawful. I paused, letting the ink dry, and kept writing. People think revenge is fire. For me, it was a thermostat set exactly right. I walked over to the wall and tapped the thermostat up 1 degree. 69. The furnace rumbled to life. That same deep hum I'd spent my life perfecting in other people's homes. It filled the air like a heartbeat. I smiled. "You didn't lose me," I said quietly, eyes on the rising temperature. "You gave me away." Outside, the snow kept falling. Somewhere, a neighbor's wind chime clinked softly like applause from the universe. I closed the ledger, slid it onto the shelf between 2 binders labeled payroll and warranties, and turned off the desk lamp. The faint glow from the porch spilled across the living room floor, warm and unbroken. Tomorrow would be just another workday. HVAC maintenance at the senior center, payroll run, maybe lunch with Nora. No drama, no courtrooms, no ghosts left to chase. Before bed, I took one last look at the fireplace. The dog stretched in front of it, sighing like a creature who never doubted me. I knelt down beside him and scratched his ear. "We're good now, buddy," I said. "Systems balanced." He wagged his tail once, the firelight flickering across his fur, and settled back down. When I stood, I could see my reflection in the window, older, steadier, free, and somewhere deep inside the house. The furnace purred, holding the line perfectly at 69 degrees. Not too cold, not too warm. Just right. Revenge had ended. Justice had stayed. And peace, for the first time in 20 years, had finally come home.